What I'm about to say, it might trigger some of you, but if you stick with me, we're going to transmute it into a potentially life-changing understanding. If you are still running from your past, you're not as healed as you think you are. And I want to make a distinction between those who have closed doors, walked away, and put up boundaries out of self-preservation, self-love, self-respect. That in of itself is a spiritual lesson, a lesson of consciousness and awakening. And I'm not referring to you because there are times in our life when working with people who are not ready to evolve or join us in the awakening journey. They are still enmeshed in patterns and viciousness or karma. And we make this decision. You can't go with me that close anymore. That is a boundary that is upholding self-love and our truth, and understanding that sometimes people get held back in grades. And if we graduate and continue on our journey, that does not say anything about our love for those people. It's just this understanding that if they didn't do their schoolwork, if they didn't show up to class, if they made decisions time and time and time again, which precipitated a natural consequence of being held back in a particular grade, we don't hold ourselves back to at a certain point on the awakening journey. We let people take responsibility for their manifestations. We let people experience the natural cause and effect, and that is wisdom. Breaking chains of codependency allows us to experience what our heart really came here to experience. And what is so insidious about this pattern in particular is that it's actually its own form of emotional unavailability. I know it. I've lived it. Tethering ourselves to people that are perpetually unwavering in their insistence of staying where they came from. Their dedication to remaining fixed and unchanged, even when presented with consequences and loss. Our ability to continue on our journey, just like we talked about in Going Alone in the last episode, is reliant upon our ability to steady within ourselves, to take the leap into the uncertain, the unknown. And so I'm not speaking to you when I talk about those that are still running from the past. This episode in particular, when I meditated on the energy, is for listener number 22. Others may resonate as well, but this is especially for you. When we are running from the past, what this looks like is that we refuse to go back to our home country. We refuse to go and visit family. We refuse to answer calls from certain people that trigger us. And some of us claim this superiority especially on the awakening journey, where we start to identify with evolution. We start to identify with transformation, transmutation. And if we're not careful, this can bleed into a sort of spiritual narcissism. Not saying that you, listener 22, are a spiritual narcissist. I'm not saying that. But that when this natural tendency of wanting to identify with this expanse, with this perhaps new way of being, when that clouds our ability to really see ourselves clearly, we can actually mistake avoidance and bypassing for growth. When we are avoiding, we are deeply uncomfortable with being seen. And I'm going to talk about why that is in a little bit, and why it's necessary to overcome, to shift into a different outcome, a different world, to transmute your past. But let's zero in on this discomfort. What I observe in those that are bypassing and avoiding is that they can hold truth for themselves, but they can't hold somebody else's truth, particularly when somebody else's truth doesn't converge in a way that makes them feel good about themselves. And so, practically speaking, what this can look like is speaking one's experience, one's emotions, one's observations, and not allowing others to speak. Putting obstacles between you and somebody else. Work. Answering that other person's call. Answering that other person's text. Hobbies. Passions. And so you've said your piece in the relationship, and you have not allowed somebody else to speak theirs. Because intuitively, there's a part of you that knows that you're not going to like what they have to say. So you avoid. You hide. You put other things in the way. And when you are running from the past, what this looks like is that you don't allow other people to witness you in your fullest form. You still have an identity module that is split between your new self and your old self. And because this isn't solidified, which is normal, by the way, I call this the vacillation effect. There is a period of time as you are turning into another version of yourself that you are upending your anchor points in your reality. You are untethering yourself. And you do so through this beautiful process that I talk about more in my EC by Dr. C private playlist. The link is in the description if you're called. It's for quantum shifters. You do it through this beautiful process that includes accessing different parts of your personality, your higher self. You load a new identity module. But for a while, it kind of feels uncomfortable. You might even have to force some parts of it if you're not intuitively using techniques like reality interrogation or sensing in tune with your intuition to understand what timeline is available to you. So you kind of have to force it and put it on like a mask. And this is what a lot of people in the manifestation culture teach. It is a way of brute forcing. It can be effective. And because it's not entirely natural yet, you will slip in between the old face and the new face, the old face and the new face. And what I have found is that those that are in this natural vacillation effect, they cannot face their old life because they don't know how to stabilize their new identity in the face of those old triggers. And so what happens is that their old identity module will be automatically loaded just by talking to their mother, just by talking to an aunt, a friend from high school. It's like the tethers of that construct of identity are tied to the way that people speak to you, the way that they say your name, the way that they reference a joke. It's interesting. In undergraduate, I was getting my degree in psychology, and we talked about this from a psychological perspective. This effect, this tendency, how we are rooted in patterns, unconscious patterns of our family. And so in this context, we were talking about going away to school and that process of shifting into a new version of you. But then when you go back home, it's like the old version of you is stimulated by your environment. And this is why addicts struggle. Because when they are trying to shift into a new version of them, a new environment, they're reworking the patterns, they're reworking the triggers. And what studies show is that addicts can make a lot of progress in their addiction journey, but when they go back to an environment, they have a higher likelihood of overdosing. And that's because those patterns put them into a state of mind. And it makes it so easy to use, so easy to slip into exactly where they left off, almost as though the identity module is right there in the wings, waiting to be loaded in their avatar. When you understand the process of personal transformation, you understand these frameworks, even if you use different ways to describe it. For me, identity modules, loading a set of behaviors, loading the way you hold your body, the way you are embodied, your preferences, your desires, your emotional templates, all of it. When that begins to shift and change, what you find is that the old version of you is still a little in your speed dial, part of your aura. It's still like right there, ready to snap you back. And with the right stimulation, with the right triggers, I'm not even talking about PTSD or complex PTSD, although that is another way that it happens. Like you're wired to go right back into the environment, into the old version of you, just by somebody saying your name in a particular tone of voice, symbolically tied to chapters of your life that you've known that you've outgrown, but you don't have the strength yet in your new version. And so they suck you back in. Not intentionally. They don't, sit around malevolently thinking about how to suck you back in. It's not quite like that. But they are who they are. And that resonance, if you still have a lingering effect, can easily pull you back in. And so those that are running from the past, and They might even be advanced on the awakening journey. They might be teachers. They might be healers. They might have retreat centers. But if they're still running from the past, they're still bifurcated in their identity. Because at the point of transmutation, you have to be strong in yourself, where you can go to the past and allow them to see you differently. For those that this is applicable to, again, some doors need to remain closed. I'm trusting your judgment on that. But other doors, what I have found is that to truly break free from the patterns, you have to show up to your past as another version of you sometimes. It's not all or none. But if this resonates with you, then you will intuitively feel it. You have to allow your family to co-manifest a different version of you. The version of you that they're holding in their minds, if you don't update that by going back and talking to them with your new name, your new identity, your new career, your new whatever it is. I literally know people, and relatively rising star / famous people in the awakening journey that left their past and refused to go back. When you allow the past to witness you and the new version of yourself, you allow them to see beyond the surface. You allow them to see that the pattern has been changed. You give them the opportunity to co-create a new reality with you instead of holding on to the thread of the old one. I remember doing this recently with somebody from my past. And as a recovering people pleaser that hid behind these illusions of agreeableness, I showed up exactly who I was in the present moment. And they acknowledged that, which I was grateful for. But they said something to the effect, "You would never talk to me this way." And that's when I knew that I had done it differently. And I continued to do it differently because that was a relationship that needed transmutation. Do all my relationships need transmutation? No. But that was one that did. When you allow for transmutation to happen, what you are allowing is for a plant that is already sprouted, that has already grown. You allow it to shapeshift, to form, and through principles of retrocausality and revision, you allow for it to flicker, to get blurry, and to turn into a different plant. If it was a rose bush full of black roses, perhaps you turn them into white roses. Or perhaps you turn them into carnations, or a different flower altogether, or maybe even a cactus. But when you're running from the past, you never allow this process to really happen. You keep the cognitive maps, the images of you in your manifested world stagnant. And as a result, you try to create something new. But everybody in your life that ever knew you, except for the new people, all of their memories, all of their experiences are going up into the collective cloud, the quantum field, and maintaining outdated versions of you. And when you do so out of fear of judgment, or because you haven't healed avoidant attachment, which I find to be quite prevalent, you then don't feel confident to handle confrontation. You don't like that friction point, particularly if you also have problems with personal power, using your voice, or being seen authentically. You don't know how to actually be challenged and to step into that version of you that confronts somebody's image of you. I see this a lot, actually. And so you let their image of you override you. You let their misconceptions, their shadows, dictate who you are and how you're supposed to perform. And instead of finding that strength to push back against that projection that is trying to engulf you, you just avoid them. You run away from them. You limit your contact with them. Again, sometimes that is appropriate. But when you're actually running from the past, you're missing an opportunity to stand strong and to say, this is who I am now. And you don't just do it once, just like setting boundaries with narcissists. You don't just do it once. You do it over and over and over and over again, with increasing consequences if you need them, until they actually get the point that you will no longer allow them to treat you in a certain way. For those of you that are coming from more arduous territory. Because how easy is it to just slip away to a spiritual awakening, to a new earth, to a retreat, to a new life, to an existence as a digital nomad, never really actually going back and setting the story straight about how you are a powerful being that cannot be with. And then you claim for yourself in your new identity that you are a powerful being, creator, reality shifter. You see how there's an incongruence there? If you are that powerful of a manifester, of a creator, then you should be able to transmute the past and any timeline that isn't in accordance with your value system. And sometimes that includes firm boundaries and walking away, and not creating this air or this illusion that the relationship is more friendly than it actually is. That your intent is to be there on the holidays when it is not. And then you're just going to, at the last minute, say something came up. Is that really strength? Is that really conviction? Is that really standing strong in who you are? Oh, sorry, Mom. I really wish I could come, but there's this work drama, and you never intended on going. So why did you create the illusion that the relationship was something that it wasn't? And you want to claim a seat at the Creator's table. Some actually want to claim a throne like a king or a queen. But it's like they're pretending. Because in the day-to-day interactions, if you can't show up with that strength of who you are, especially in the face of opposition, or especially when shadow is trying to creep in and rule the show, and you don't have the authority in your own life to push back, to create a boundary around your image, and instead slip away, calling avoidance evolution, I would say you're not as healed as you think you are. At some point, when you really step into authority, you really step into your power, your boundaries change, your behavioral templates change, your willingness to tolerate people's unhealed fill in the blank changes. And when you start to really see with discernment and wisdom, you start to understand that there is a line between somebody's unhealed work and your own. And you start to question these catechisms, like the world is just a reflection of who you are. Yes, sometimes. But other times, it is actually somebody's unhealed baggage that is coming along. And the way you choose to show up in that moment is what signifies to you your own growth. I remember I had a close friend for a while who was very heavy in their shadow. And they came to my house, stole from me while maintaining this air on the surface, And the way I chose to deal with it was to completely shut down until they left. I didn't fight. I didn't engage. I actually, once I saw that there was no space for me to speak, there was no space for me to confront. It was like, let me be in my shadow. You can't call me out. You can't say anything. Once I recognized that, I closed the door and I actually just stopped talking. To this day, they paint me as an enemy because I didn't make it comfortable for them. And I didn't explain myself. I asked them to leave when they were ready. I gave them an extension. I wasn't mean about it, but I literally just closed the door on the friendship. I spoke my truth. I spoke my piece. Even that wasn't honored or heard. and I let them go. That, for me, was doing it differently. I let them be exactly who they were, and I didn't try to change them. I honored where they were at, and I still said, no more. And I didn't negotiate. I didn't try to work it out. I didn't invalidate myself. I just responded differently by not responding.